Kaitlin. Hello. How are you? I'm good. How are you? So fun to see you again. Been a while. It has been a while. Well, thanks so much for joining me for our Wednesday wellness call. So the first Wednesday of each month, we like either do a book club or an interview with someone who's inspiring. And so we're gonna interview you because you're so inspiring. I'm excited to learn about you and your journey of your with achieving like peace with your food and everything. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe some of the past issues that you had with food and the challenges that you faced on your weight loss journey. And then, yeah, how you overcame them, maybe some of the tools that helped you to overcome them. So, yeah.
Sounds good. So I grew up in Utah and I'm from a family of 6 kids. I love that. It's so fun. I studied nutrition at BYU and actually exercise science as well. I kind of tagged the second major on just because I was interested. And also, it was just a few more classes. And so I've always loved learning about health and I've always been so interested in it and the body and how it works. And I was also a binge eater. It was kind of a nightmare, but I'm happy to say that now I can call myself an ex being binge eater, which I never thought I would be able to say. It was very frustrating growing up and wanting to be healthy and learning about health and how important it was, and then not seeming to be able to apply those things that I learned because I had this issue with food. So,
How long
um,
do you struggle with that? Like, how long had you been struggling with binge eating and your health?
yeah, it's been well. So I know that I went to Weight Watchers at 10. I started probably before that, maybe 8 or 9 or who knows how long, but it was at least a couple years. And yeah, so it's been over 20 years since then. Basically, it's that's a long time.
Yeah, like a lifetime of struggle. I was in Weight Watchers when I was a teenager too. So it was like a lifetime of struggle with your relationship with food and
Mhm.
your body. And you studied it in college. It it was still an issue for you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell us like the messy middle. The messy
Okay.
middle.
All right. I remember probably I was 9 or 10. I remember sneaking out of a family party to be by myself with this plate full of food and desserts and just eating it on my own because I was so embarrassed about how much I was eating, but also I couldn't seem to stay away from it. There was a lot of shame surrounding that. At 10 years old, I started going to Weight Watchers. I got a doctor's note specifically for it because I was so young. And I was 160 pounds, which for at 10 years old, that's a little bit above my healthy weight now at my age. And so it's like that's significant. And I started going to Weight Watchers, and then I remember getting so frustrated with the point system because I always seemed to run out of points before I felt like I should because like I was still hungry and I still wanted more food, and then she was like so frustrated. And so I saw results, in the very beginning, and then once I started getting frustrated with it and couldn't seem to do it anymore, then it's like, oh, it wasn't really working for me anymore.
Mhm.
And then I think we tried the South Beach diet at one point, and I saw some success with that. I'm pretty sure at that point I had cut out flour and sugar, and I remember feeling some separation from the food, like, oh, it's not pulling me so much after a little while of being sugar and flour free. And then, of course, I ate something that was sugary and it turned that part of my brain on, and I'm like, I can't stay away anymore. And then, of course, on my mission, my mom found Impulsive Eaters Anonymous and she referred that to me. I started doing that when I got back from my mission. I tried a little bit on my mission, but it was tricky. When I got back, I started doing that and saw a lot of success because it was no sugar, no flour, and weighed and measured food. It was very controlled, right?
Mhm.
And that's what I needed at that time. But then I would get rebellious and then I'd want to like eat something that, I knew would kind of throw me off the path, and with my psychology that I had at the time.
Mhm.
And that, put me back up to like over 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 100. I should be over 100. But then, so I started going to college, started studying nutrition, but this was before like my weight shot up again. And so I was like, it's like, oh yeah, nutrition, this is great. And then when my weight started going back up, I just felt so much shame about it because it's like I was with all these students who were also learning about nutrition. Oh, yeah, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I feel so embarrassed right now, thinking that they're probably thinking this and judging me and whatever,
Mhm.
which maybe they weren't, but that I definitely was. And so those were my thoughts in all of that. And so my grades definitely suffered because I was, eating was a big part of my life, and it was like I hid the food too. I didn't want anyone to know. I
Mm.
tried not to tell anyone about it. Brain fog. I slept more. All of this interfered with everything in my life. And then my mom introduced me to Brightline eating, which has the boundaries around food with the weighing and measuring, and also the sugar and flour is out. But it's a little bit less strict as far as like they let you have a little bit more fruit than
Mm.
Compulsive Eaters Anonymous did, and so I guess the change helped me to be like, "Okay, we'll try this and see if it works," and it really did. I tried it quite a few times, and it always worked when I tried it, but when I got off of it, then my weight would go back up, and so I'm sure anyone who listens to this would be able to relate to that, who have tried to lose weight and can't seem to keep it off. I think that's a very common situation.
I think a lot of people in our community can really resonate with your experience. Not everyone is a person that experiences food addiction, but some people have brains that are highly susceptible to it, and not everyone understands. But this is something that rings true in our community that we've tried it all, and you just feel out of control around food and shame around it and hiding and all of that. It's hard and that's painful place to be.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And of course I worked with you, which was amazing. But then I got to this point where I think I was a little bit rebellious as well as some financial things. So I was like, "Can't do this anymore." So and
Right.
that shot me up higher than I've ever been. And so yeah, it's definitely a relatable experience, I think, which helps me talk about it because it's like, oh, I'm not the only one. I know that there are other people who struggle with this.
And I think
But
that sharing it and being vulnerable is just so powerful because it helps us to know that we're not alone, right? If there's someone here on the call that's struggling, you're not alone. There's no room for shame in this community. I think it's important for us to be vulnerable and to share our wins and our struggles. And it's just all the messy middle, right? As we
yeah.
are going toward that future that we're wanting with our health.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
what did it look like for you? What was your turning point?
Yeah. So I think the main turning point was there were a lot of things that led up to this, but basically I got to the point where I was just kind of frustrated. I was frustrated this whole time. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I remember I was complaining to my mom about it one time. I was like, I just don't know how to figure this out because if I start doing what I was doing before, I feel like I'll run into the same obstacles and I don't know how to overcome the psychology that is going on in my brain. And then she referred me to this book called Altogether You. It's about a Christian approach to internal family systems. I started reading it and I'm just grateful that I was humble enough to open the book because in that moment I was like, Mom, I've tried everything. That's not going to help. But the spirit was like, maybe you should. I felt like God was saying, you should probably explore this. And I was like, okay. So I opened the book and read it and I started practicing some of the things that they have in there. And I was like, huh, there's something to this because I sensed that when I did it with a smaller issue, it was like an embarrassment feeling about something that you really shouldn't need to be embarrassed about. And I was like, this seems to have some weight to it. It seems like I'm actually getting somewhere with that. So I think the next part that I worked on was the part that drives me to binge eat, specifically the binge eating, not necessarily just eating processed food and sugar. But it was so cool because when I explored that part, I found out that it was a part of me that felt so much deprivation and scarcity, and it was afraid that I was going to not have enough. And so it was trying to protect me from that, you know? And when I talked through it with that part, and I was like, hey, like, we have lots of things. It was living in the past. It was still my 10-year-old self who felt like there wasn't enough for some reason. I didn't even have to find out the root cause, like why I became like why I felt that way. So I brought that part into the present moment and showed the part, we're doing good. Like we have plenty of food, we have plenty of what we need, and we're safe. And so uh, I also was able to show that part, all the pain that had come from this behavior and all the ways that I felt like I didn't have enough of things that I wanted because of this behavior. And that, basically that what I call it a she because I kind of like to humanize my parts, but she was like, "Oh, yeah, like this behavior that I'm perpetuating is actually creating more of what I don't want, which is scarcity, right?" And so I found that by nature that part actually was trying to add to my joy. I learned a lot about what it can lead me to instead of food. All the joyful things about life that are so uplifting, it makes you feel fulfilled. And once I got her on my side, I didn't need willpower. I felt like my nature had changed almost. And it was so cool. And since then, I've worked with a lot of different parts. I have like 60 pages of, because I like to write it at the same time. I like to write down what I say, what the part says, and kind of the conversation that I have. And so I have like 60 pages of those conversations with my parts. I like to call them by attributes. So like the part that wanted to binge eat is my joy. And then I have like I've met my determination, my hope, my ambition, my trust, my compassion, my worth, my desire, my reverence to God. All of those things, all of those parts had something that was burdening them. And I was able to walk through the healing process with them and show compassion to those parts so that I could heal and, live true to myself, live true to my true self. Because for a long time, I identified as a compulsive eater or a binge eater. And they kind of, in Compulsive Eating Anonymous, Eaters Anonymous, they even kind of encourage that, like, oh, I'm Kaitlin, I'm a compulsive eater. I realize now that I don't need to define myself by the wounded parts that are within me. I can define myself by something deeper that is going to stick around, that's not based on experiences I've had, but that's my true spirit that is compassionate and curious and connected and wants to help the whole world because it's my true self. So when those parts aren't just getting in the way all the time, then I'm able to connect with that more and be aligned in my actions.
Wow, Caitlin, that's amazing. I think that a lot of us have behaviors that are self-destructive or we find ourselves self-sabotaging. And sometimes we have these internal battles. Like part of us wants to be healthy and part of us wants to throw that out the window and just do whatever we want, right? And that's what parts work is. It's just learning to identify the different parts of us and learning to talk with them, right? I think for people who are new to internal family systems or they've never heard that before, it can sound kind of funny and weird. Like I remember when I first heard of internal family systems, I was kind of like, what is that? It seemed kind of strange to me how it's kind of like thinking of ourselves with multiple personalities, and we kind of all are people that have multiple personalities, but we have different parts of us. I haven't finished reading Altogether You, but I recently read a book called Boundaries for Your Soul, and it's internal family systems with a Christian perspective too. And so I started reading Altogether You though, and it's just really similar, the things that they're teaching there. And I think maybe for someone who's not familiar with parts work, parts work is just learning to focus on a certain part of you. Like if you're having a strong emotion, or if you find yourself in a behavior that you don't want to be, you want to focus on that part and befriend that part of you, that there's no bad parts inside of us. They're all trying to help us in some way. Just some parts of us don't really understand that they're not really helping, right? And so that's where we have to learn to lead those parts of us with the higher part of us, like our divine nature, our spirit led self, and lead them and try to get to understand them and unburden them. I'm not an expert in parts work either. I'm just learning about it. But like learning to just give them a voice and try to help them to feel seen, that part of us, help it to feel seen instead of like pushing those feelings down or avoiding them uh, or isolating, right? Like we're trying to like help them to be seen. And as we can uh, learn to like talk to those parts of us, it helps them to unburden so that they can uh, have a new role and that part of us can grow and progress and um take on a new role like you talked about with that part of you that was feeling so deprived and scarce that you kind of gave that part a new role. Tell us more about that deprivation part and how it evolved into being able to take on that new role of joy.
Yeah, absolutely. So luckily I recorded all of it in
Uh-huh.
my phone so I could go back to it and see exactly what happened. Something that helps me with the parts is that I identify the behavior or the emotion. And then I notice where it is in my body, what it feels like, the sensation that's there. And
Mhm.
then I ask it to step away for a minute so that I can connect to my true self. And once I feel compassionate and connected and curious and all those C's, they have like the 8 C's,
Yeah, like
the
calm.
calm, yeah, the identifiers for you being connected to your true self. And once I'm feeling that way, I'm able to talk to that part. I like to kind of imagine what they might look like and what their expression on their face is. And then, of course, what they say to me. So, this part that was driving me to overeat, she was just like this round, small, pink, plump, adorable little character
Uh-huh.
with like a little bow on her head. And I was like, that's so funny that she showed up that way, because that's not how I've been treating her. I've been treating her as something that should be cast out. It's like, get away, stop.
Dangerous or
Yeah,
right.
exactly. So that for one really helped me have compassion for her because I'm like, oh, she's adorable. So why wouldn't I have compassion for her? And then I reassured her that I knew she was scared, like that I wanted to help her know that she was safe. And I apologized for trying to suppress her for so long. Um, and then I asked her, like, why do you want to have control over what I eat and how much I eat all the time? What's motivating you? And then she told me, like, I don't feel like we ever have enough and I feel deprived and I want you to not be deprived. And then I asked how old she was, and I saw the picture of me going away from that party with all that food and eating all by myself. And I realized I was probably about 9 or 10 when she kind of came out, whenever that was.
Mhm.
And and I don't know exactly where that scarcity mindset came from, but I validated how she felt. Like, "Oh, like, I understand that that would feel scary to not feel like you have enough," you know? It
Mm.
would feel scary to feel like I don't know when I'm gonna be able to taste this again or eat this again, so I should really stock up. And I thanked her for trying her best to keep me safe from those feelings because she was trying to help me,
Mhm.
trying to do her best to keep me safe from something that she saw as a threat. And then I tried to show her my present state, and then I showed her all the pain from the history of eating this way, and then all the things that were scarce in my life, like it was sapping my money because I was buying things that weren't necessary and so much of it that it was really taking all my extra money. And then dating was harder because I didn't have as much confidence and just not being able to serve in the ways that I wanted to. So I showed her all of those things. And then she understood. She was like, yeah, okay. And I don't know how to describe the feeling. It's just kind of like this release of, oh, I don't need to do that anymore.
Mm.
And so then she was really excited to help me after that. She's like, "Yeah, I can get on board with helping you eat healthy, you know? And then I was like, teach me some ways that, well, I asked her what she was good at. I like asking them what they're good at. And she says, I'm good at helping you find things to spice up your life, you know? And that makes sense because she was trying to like add yummy foods that would spice up my life. Then I asked her to teach me what are some things that can do that for me. I saw things come into my brain about making progress towards my goals and practicing my talents and spending time with God, being in nature. All these different things came into mind. And it's interesting because the very thing that was taking my joy actually turned out to be something that could really add to my joy. And it's because it was wounded. It's almost like, I don't know if you've seen Moana,
Mhm.
how when her heart was out of her, she turned into this destructive being. But then when her heart was back in her, she's like creating everything. There's so much life and goodness, you know, and I just feel like that was kind of the part when when it was burdened, it was totally opposite of what it naturally was. So
Oh, that's such a great visualization. Give it in that way, because that's what it feels like. It's like these parts of us, they're trying to help and they're wounded and they don't know how to help. And it's so neat to be able to help transform and see the transformation of those parts of us that have struggled so long. Like those wounded parts can heal. In the book Boundaries for Your Soul, one thing I really love about that book is it helps to like, bring Jesus into the process of transformation. It's like inviting him to draw near to those wounded parts and asking Jesus if he wants to say anything to our parts or give us a gift to our parts, like helping our parts to unburden to Jesus too and give up that burden to him, like release
yeah,
those burdens to
yeah,
Christ, and I think that's really eye-opening to me. I've heard of parts work, but when I read the book Boundaries for Your Soul and with All Together You, I just love bringing God into it and having him help to heal those wounded parts of us that have been struggling so long, and it's really hopeful that we can all know that there is hope for us, like, no matter how many years that we've struggled, how much pain our issues with food and our body have caused us, like there is hope and we can heal. What I love about your story, Caitlin, is you struggled and tried so many different things, and none of those attempts were failed or wasted, right? You learned something new each time, and you kept adjusting your strategy to find what really worked for you. I think that is the key to success, to never give up and to keep learning from your experience, adjusting your strategy until you find what does work for you.
yeah,
So, and the tool of internal family systems is, I think, a really powerful tool for anyone who's struggling with behaviors that they don't want to be doing or big emotions that they don't want to be feeling. Like it's just a great way to understand yourself better and to feel better, just by learning to to deal with those emotions that way.
oh, it's done so much more for me than just the food. It's really calmed my nervous system down. I didn't realize how up in arms it was about everything until I
Mhm.
I worked through some of these parts and I realized, wow, I can sleep better. And I feel calm most of the day. It's kind of weird. Like I don't feel this uptight, anxious feeling all the time. Yeah, it can do a lot of good, even not surrounding food, you know?
'Cause, like, I always think of our feelings like those big emotions, like a beach ball that we try to push under the water. If we try to, like, push them down or avoid them or ignore them, then they just
Mhm.
pop up bigger, But, like, when you just really like, earlier today, Cheryl was talking about just inviting them to the table. We were in a different call, and Cheryl was talking about that, like, inviting all of those parts to the table and just hearing what they have to say, and just validating it and accepting it and accepting whatever they have to say instead of pushing our feelings away, to give them a voice and to be able to understand what we're feeling and why we're feeling that way and allowing the emotions. Like I know you've also worked with Jody Moore in her program, and that's one thing that she teaches is just learning to process emotions in a healthy way, is just allowing the emotion and relaxing into it instead of resisting it,
Yeah.
which makes
Yeah,
it so much worse.
it does. And I think that's one reason God asks us to come to him with our feelings because he knows that's how we process. It's like sitting with those feelings and being heard is so helpful too, knowing that God is listening to us. And this is just a way for us to be kind of like a little godling in to ourselves, like to help ourselves do that. And I love that you mentioned bringing God and Christ into it because genuinely, many times I feel like I don't know where to go with this part. I'm not sure what questions to ask or what to say to help it to release this feeling, and I very often am praying like, help me to figure this part out. And I do believe God has been with me in that process and that it's really powerful when we involve him. So I just love what you're saying about emotions, processing them properly and just not suppressing them and being like, oh, that's a bad feeling, because really what can it do to you? If you just feel it and notice it, it's not going to kill you. Like
Right, it makes it go away faster.
I've heard it said that it's kind of like a wave, like it comes through you if you
Mhm.
just let it pour over and that's it. So,
Yeah, and those are, like, different parts of us, like, for me, like, anxiety is, like, a part or, sadness or, like, it's just, I think, helpful to think of ourselves in that way. So, what is life like for you now that you have been able to stop binging, and how has that like, what are the benefits that you've seen in your life from being able to use these tools to change your behavior in that way?
oh, so many good things. I feel like I'm happier than I've ever been, and I've always been called a pretty happy person, and I've always thought of myself as pretty happy, but I just feel, so much trust in myself, like, I'm not gonna do something that betrays myself when it comes to food especially. I can trust that I'm good. I don't feel drawn to those foods anymore in the same way that I was, and I feel like I've finally kind of grown up in a way, like, I'm more capable. I'm not stuck in the past so much. I'm able to move towards my health goals. I still have, like, 50 pounds I'd like to lose, but it's over 60 are gone now, which is so cool. And just overall, the feeling of good health, just like of this well-being in my body, like, no matter what happens in my day, it doesn't throw me off because I feel good in my body, and that's, like, priceless to me, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just really excited for the future as opposed to, like, when I was struggling with that, it felt like a never-ending cycle that it was hard for me to think about the next 5 years because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, am I still gonna be dealing with this in 5 years?" I thought it was just gonna be kind of a lifetime thing, and I'm grateful that it's not. It's also fun to see changes in my behavior, like, in little things. I used to, before going on a date, get really stressed out about if we were going out to eat because I was like, "Oh, if I was on plan, if I was doing what I had planned to do, then is this gonna really be what it needs to be for me?" Or like, if somebody asked me to ice cream and I stress out, I don't know what to say. Do I say yes and then just break my lines or, you know?
Mhm.
So it was a very stressful situation for me whenever I would go out on a date. Um, and now I'm just like, I know what I want to eat and it's always the good stuff because my body craves it. And okay, it's not always the good stuff. There are moments where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that tasting good, but it's not a big deal. And then, or like one time I remember I was at an institute class and they were having food after. And I had already eaten dinner and I wasn't really hungry. I was pretty full actually. 'Cause I'd eaten my fill, whatever I needed. And then one of the ladies, she was like, "Are you gonna get some cereal?" Because they were having cereal for dinner. And I was like, "No, I'm okay." And she's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "I don't wanna overeat." And it just came out so naturally, and it just felt so true to myself to say that. And it wasn't like I was grasping at excuses like I normally did, like, "Oh, no, I'm okay. I don't eat sugar," or whatever.
Mhm.
But it was just like a true statement that was just aligned with who I was, and it felt so real and right? And it was so weird to have that experience because I was so used to just coming up with excuses or just trying to avoid the topic because I just felt weird. I felt like I was a weirdo.
Right.
In that instance, I was like, I don't feel like I'm a weirdo. I'm just being true to myself. And so it's just fun to see different behaviors come through or like, I guess, lack of certain feelings in certain situations that I used to have, or
Mhm.
I don't know, just like more self assuredness. So yeah, it's been really great, and I'm happy about it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, Caitlin. I think for all of us, like, who are on a health journey, a lot of times we focus so much on the weight or on, the external transformation, but really, like, to create sustainability with a healthy transformation, we also have to transform internally, and I think that we have to heal and part of that healing is, like, doing this inner work that helps us to understand, like, why we would eat off plan in the first place, right? If we can really address that and understand that, it makes this a sustainable lifestyle. Whereas if you just focus on changing your behaviors, but you still have all of those feelings and thoughts inside of you, that's why a lot of people regain all of their weight back and more, and they are on that binge restrict cycle. Transformation, it's not just about a physical transformation, it really is about mental, emotional, and spiritual transformation as well. To be able to create that sustainability, we have to not only focus on our physical health, but also on the mental, emotional, and spiritual part of us as well. This is such a great tool that I think can really be helpful for all of us who have ever had issues with feeling out of control around food or wanting to find more peace with their body
Mhm.
is learning how to practice internal family systems. I think it's a really helpful modality, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your experience with us. Are there any other encouraging words of advice that you'd have for others who are just starting this journey or who are struggling?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would want people to know is that you're worthy of your own love, if that makes sense. For so long, I thought that once I reached my goal of losing weight, then I could love myself. And then I could be kind to myself. And then I could respect myself. But I realized that it's totally opposite. You have to understand and love yourself as you are right now. And really, love isn't about somebody being perfect. You can love somebody who's imperfect. We all love imperfect people because we're all imperfect. But we, for some reason, think that we're an exception and that we have to earn our love, earn other people's love, earn God's love, but we don't. That's, I think, the biggest thing that I've learned from parts work is that love is really the thing that can change your heart and can change other people's hearts. It's not forcing or pushing or being angry at or criticizing, which is all the things that I would be doing to myself. It's just showing compassion and trying to understand and trying to help in whatever way possible and whatever way is allowed. And so I just want to emphasize that you can love yourself today and that will push you towards the things that you desire for yourself.
That's so profound that so often we think we have to hate ourselves to healthy, right?
Mhm.
Like we'll love ourselves when we get to our goal. But it's really like you said, the opposite. It's like if you can learn to love yourself right now, just as you are, then I feel like that's such a healthier way to go about this process of transformation and loving yourself to healthy and wanting to be healthy because you love yourself and you want to take care of yourself. And
Mhm.
it's just different. It's such a different mindset than having that negative self talk and criticism. Like that never is helpful. So, thank
So
you
true.
so much, Caitlin, for coming today. So grateful for you sharing your story and being vulnerable and sharing this. It resonates so much with me as I have been a person that has struggled with binge eating and have recently like found the power of parts work. And so I'm so grateful for you sharing this tool with our community and I think it will be really helpful. So, is there anyone on the call that has any questions for Caitlin or for me about your program, about your health journey? Now is your time. Just go ahead and either raise your hand or go ahead and put a question in the chat. And while you do that, Caitlin, I just wanted to ask really quick. So, when you're talking about naming your parts, so you name them, tell me a little bit more about how you name your parts, because I wanted to clarify that while people are
Yeah.
thinking of their question or putting it in the chat.
Yeah. So what I do is basically what happens is when I'm talking with them and understanding what they care about, it kind of guides me a little bit to what, because I like thinking of them as attributes or parts that have that attribute, like my compassionate part or my joyful part.
Mhm.
Um, and so, for example, I had a part that whenever I looked at a food that in the past I would have binged on, I got scared. Like I literally had a fear. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. What's that about?" When I explored it, it was like, "I'm just afraid that we're gonna go back to binging, and I'm afraid that we're going to eat that and then just go off the rails and just feel horrible in our body and just like, I don't want you to do that." And I was like, "Okay. So thank you for that. Yeah, I don't wanna do that either, and I appreciate you having that concern and expressing it." I got to the point where I was like, "Okay, you care a lot about warning me about this food issue, right?" I was like, "So what's your name?" I just kinda asked their name, and then kind of
Mhm.
sometimes it comes easily, sometimes it doesn't, but in this case, it came as like, "I'm your wisdom." Like, I'm somebody I'm your part that wants you to make right choices that will make you feel good and not so yeah, wisdom or counselor came to my mind, both of those. And so, yeah, so that's basically what I do is just kind of based on what they are good at or care about, I I just kinda like to name them so that they're a little bit more tangible, instead of like, "Oh, it's the part that made me binge eat," you know? And, because it's also about identity, like changing that part's identity to from something that they used to do to something that is more true to them, like something that they can do for me that's better and yeah.
Yeah, because I like how you name them positive things. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just new to parts work. And so I think of sometimes like my anxiety part or my overwhelmed part. But like that just kind of keeps them stuck in that role. And so
Mhm.
I like how you kind of have shifted it into making them a more looking at what they're trying to do and what they're good at and naming
Yeah.
them something more positive.
Oh, because well, then I don't think of them as their behavior. I don't think of them
Yeah.
in that negative light anymore, which I think is really important to really feeling compassion for them and for understanding them better and just not being mad at them, you know? Like, obviously, my true self
Right.
isn't what's gonna be mad at them. It was probably another part that was mad about it, like maybe my wisdom. Um, but yeah, yeah, so it definitely has power, I think.
Yeah, that's interesting because like when you think of little kids, you don't really want to put labels on kids, right? Like
Yeah.
because then they identify as that and then they don't. And then it's hard for them to, break out of that label. And but so it's kind of like the same with our parts, I think, that choosing, something more empowering for them instead of labeling them for their behavior. So that's really great insight that I gained from our talk today.
Yeah, good.
Thank
I'm
you
glad.
so much.
Powerful for me.
So one question that's in the chat is like, so Sarah was saying, I'm not as good at this part's work, but I've been trying to learn and it's hard for me to separate it and talk to it. So if you have a suggestion on how to imagine this part and separate it and talk to it, let me know. What tips do you have for like separating yourself from that part?
Yeah. So what I do is just like I have to be aware of it in my body first so that I can recognize when it's kind of separated and step back from me. So, like, if it's anxiety and it's kind of like in my chest or like lungs or wherever it might be, just recognizing the sensation and where it's at. And then usually when I ask it to step back, usually I take a deep breath, like just kind of release the energy, whatever that energy is. Whether it's like anxiety or embarrassment or whatever. Sometimes I think it might be helpful just to like just sit with the emotion for a while until it just goes away on its own. And then when I do feel those positive emotions, like just like a feeling of calmness and connectedness, compassion, all of those things, then I can ask myself, because really it's not like a character in your brain necessarily, right? It's you're asking yourself, but it something about separating it in your brain as like a separate entity, I feel like helps psychologically to have compassion for it maybe. And so really you're just asking yourself. You're just saying like, why are you feeling anxious? Like tell me about it. What are you afraid of? And just gently asking your body, yourself, which is, in parts work, you would call it the part, right? But, and just kind of listen to whatever thoughts come to mind and whatever, if another feeling pops up, like be aware of that. Images sometimes come to me, of like maybe a situation I was in recently, like, oh, I'm feeling anxious about that situation that happened earlier today. Why am I feeling anxious about it? What happened that made me feel like something bad's going to happen because of it? Sometimes it's just clear thoughts just come into my mind of like, I'm afraid that I'm not good enough or something. It'll just come into my mind. I think it takes practice being aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling in your body, and practice makes perfect, at least better.
I love that. What I find is anytime I'm feeling a strong emotion or I find myself doing a behavior I don't want to do, like I recognize that it's not me. It's not who I really am. It's just like a part of me. And so I just put in the chat like the questions from Boundaries for Your Soul that I use to do parts work. And so first you just like focus on that feeling or emotion. Like you said, like where do you sense it physically in your body? And is there a thought or image that comes to your mind when you focus on that? Is there an early memory of this feeling? And then just befriending that, like, how do you feel toward that part of your soul? I like these questions because for me, as someone who's new to all of this, I'm like, am I doing this right? I don't even really know how to do this or separate it. So I relate to you, Sarah. Going through these questions has helped me step by step. I'll go on a walk and answer each of these questions one by one and then work through it. That kind of helps me to separate myself from it, that it's not me who's angry or upset, or it's just like a part of me that is. And then just learning to give that part of me a voice, like radical acceptance of that part and
Mhm.
befriending it and inviting Jesus to be near, like unburdening that part, listening to that part, and then integrating it, finding a way to give it a new role or help it to feel more peace. So, yeah, it's just like a way to do that parts work and thought work. Thank you
Oh, that's
so much
awesome.
for sharing, Sarah. And there's one more resource that Cheryl she shared with me today that I thought was so great. And this is from the book Boundaries for Your Soul, just like a kind of like a summary of what parts work is. And I'm putting that in the chat here if you want to look at that. That just is kind of a little synopsis of what parts work is, like the different parts of us and you know, learning and the different like our the different parts and our our highest self and what all of those things mean. So that's like a fun resource Cheryl shared with me earlier today. Well, Kaylin, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. I hope this was helpful for you. And yeah, there's hope, you guys. There's hope for us if you're struggling with your relationship with food in your body. We can find peace. Doing this inner work, I think, is an important part of the process of um, being able to find peace with food in your body. I hope you have a great day, everybody. Thanks for coming, Caitlin. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It was fun.
You are the best. I just love you so much, and I learned so much from you today. That was really helpful for me.
Thank you.
Okay, well, have a great day, everybody.